All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick are our 2023 preview and prediction for the Pac-12 conference. And obviously, Nick, the biggest headline out west is this conference is likely to be non-existent sometime soon. Obviously, my initial reaction to USC and UCLA moving to the Big Ten was that the Pac-12 wasn't going to survive. I was aware of the looming TV contract and a valuable place didn't seem to be available for them, and it still doesn't look like they have one inked or even were close to one. The Pac-12, though, they failed to have a contingency plan in place, Nick, when they knew a catastrophic failure was very realistic. They didn't even extend an offer to San Diego State, for example. These departing schools not thinking of the student athletes is a bit skewed, I would say, in terms of a narrative, because there's no future TV money, and at some point you have to look out for your own program, which will trickle down to everyone. So obviously flying out to places like New Jersey, it's not optimal, but at the same time, I definitely think that's a bit of a skewed narrative people are trying to run with here. The only saving grace for the Pac-12 is to adapt and become like the Big East. I believe you're the one that had said that, Nick. Grab elite basketball schools like Gonzaga, St. Mary's, and just essentially scrap football or just try to field 8 teams on the gridiron. The PAC, I think, can come out of this in a pretty all-right position, but it seems like they've practically given zero effort. A lot of news going out here, Nick, because these teams really just blindsided this conference. I guess Oregon and Washington, right before one of the meetings, announced, hey, we're leaving, and that's it. Jaw-dropping type news for this conference to try and deal with. But can you blame these schools for just abruptly departing? Because like I said, they really got to start looking out for themselves at some point, and this conference seems to have given zero attempt to try and stay afloat.
Pac-12 really did not have a contingency plan, like you said, and they found themselves in a tough spot. We knew this was coming soon, right? The Pac-12 in 2011, they signed a 12-year deal with Fox and ESPN worth a close $3 billion. That was the big jackpot deal they struck when they were the Pac-10 and they were getting ready to move towards expansion in the prelude to the 2013 major realignment that saw the death of the Big East in terms of football and things like that. The payout was roughly, $225 million, $250 million a year for the league, right? So that was a solid revenue for the league, considering at the time the SEC, the Big Ten were making, in that 200 ballpark. This 12-year deal was a really solid deal for them, but we knew this deal was expiring. The deal was coming to an end at the end of 2023. We knew it was approaching, and they had to come up and start to thinking something. They got their lawyers together and they were trying to make a plan, but they clearly were not planning for schools to bolt for better deals. The SEC got their huge deal with ESPN, backing out of the CBS deal. The Big Ten got their big deals, making their moves as well. The Big 12 made their shuffle, and the Pac-12 just gets left in the dust. I think, like I said in previous episodes, and as you said just a couple seconds ago alluding to, the Pac-12 has to go the Big East route if they want to even survive in any way, and just add basketball schools. There's a lot of talent out west, a lot of schools in the WCC, the WAC, and other conferences like that have some serious talent. They're going to have to try and add those schools. Gonzaga would be a great add. They're a basketball program first. They don't have a football program. There's no worries there. Gonzaga is a national brand. St. Mary's, another solid national brand. University of San Francisco, a team that's on the up and up in college basketball. You can grab other teams in that area, UNLV, San Diego State. These are all teams that should be available for a conference like the Pac-12. I agree with you. They should have offered San Diego State a while ago. They could get San Diego State as a basketball focus and have them go independent with football potentially. I think there are some options for the conference. I fully dead, but they just outplayed themselves. They really outthought themselves, and they caused this to themselves. And the bigger schools bolt for greener pastures, and it really has it's been a tough fought for the Pac-12 here, and they're finding themselves in a tough situation.
Yeah, the WAC, the Big East, these used to be football conferences, and now they've trying to trickle down to basketball only, and it's still, worked out pretty well for those conferences. People have remained employed. It's worked out for the student athletes. Very interesting to see what happens here. But yeah, these schools continue to get poached, and they don't seem to care one bit. They're about to be left with 0 schools here at some point. If the ACC wanted to, they probably could have plucked the remaining of this away. I don't really know what's going on out west. I don't think, again, they still have not seemed to put much effort in trying to keep this conference remaining around. So this does seem like it'll be the last year for the PAC, Nick, and I think this conference is looking for a great farewell. They have a numerous amount of teams here that I think can make the college football playoff, and obviously USC. We have them advancing to the CFP. Caleb Williams, a remaining Heisman Trophy winner, and obviously he's expected to do so once again. This guy's an elite improviser who's great on the run, great arm talent. I picked him to win the Heisman last year. Him following Lincoln Riley over to LA, it seemed like a match made in heaven with all this talent they have. Attack the portal hard once again. They picked up Marshawn Lloyd, the pair up with Austin Jones in the backfield. Dorian Singer, they snagged him from Arizona, a dangerous open field playmaker. Taj Washington returns alongside Mario Williams, who's a dynamic slot option. Brennan Rice really as a physical imposer, impressed down the stretch last season. And then Zach Branch, a number 7 overall recruit who has elite game-breaking speed. And then a top 50 recruit, Mekhi Lemon, another dynamic athlete. They're incredibly loaded at the skill positions here, Nick. The run game was certainly pretty inconsistent last year, especially in those Tulane and Utah games. They really could not lean on the run one bit with a beat-up Caleb Williams, who couldn't do much of his legs due to a hamstring injury. And that's something that's certainly going to be a concern for them, because this offensive line is certainly capable of pushing them to more than the 53rd ranked rushing attack, which I certainly think is a bit of a skewed number, because last year at times they really struggled with consistency and to put up numbers on the ground. They don't need to be too great, because obviously they're going to get theirs through the air, but that's the one thing they're looking for this year is balance and consistency, because everything else, again, top 3 in yards, passing yards, and points per game last season. Balance and consistency is the focal point for Riley here for this air raid-like system.
I think that's the only negative you can really say is they lack that balance on the ground. They really need to find a better balance. When you look at the stats of this offense this past season, it was incredible, right? 3rd in the country in points per game, 3rd in yards per game, 3rd in pass yards per game, 53rd in rush yards per game, right? No one's expecting USC to go out there and run, every single game and put up, 300 yards on the ground. No one's expecting that, but they could certainly improve the number. I think Austin Jones and Marshawn Lloyd are a good 1-2 punch in the backfield. Jones, very good at getting through tackles. Nice outside zone runner. Caleb Williams can make some moves on the ground as well. I think he might stay in the pocket a little bit more this year. You kind of want to protect him. We saw the injury at the end of last season, potentially raise some red flags. He has such a talented wide receiving core to throw to. Dorian Singer, really dangerous in the open field, great player. Taj Washington, he's my favorite wide receiver on this team. I think he's a very exciting piece. Doesn't get enough love in the national conversation, in my opinion, but he is so talented. Mario Williams, Brennan Rice as well, 2 very talented players. And then they brought in a bunch of really incredible athletes from their recruiting class, like Lemon and Branch. So overall, I think this wide receiving unit is very deep, and I think this offensive line is also pretty solid as well.
Yeah, the offensive line, they also need to be better with consistency. Justin Diedich is back, though, as a veteran senior. He does a great job of anchoring versus some bigger linemen. Michael Tarquan, 6'5", 320, comes over from the Gators. He was great as a pass blocker. Jarrett Kingston was a phenomenal left tackle. He's really good at guard. He's probably going to slide in there from Washington State. Emmanuel Pregnon from Wyoming, 6'6", 312. Jonah Menhem allowed 0 sacks and over 1K snaps played last season. He was mainly right tackle, did play a good bit at right guard. Essie had great health on the offensive line during the regular season. So depth and experience is a little bit iffy, but once again, they were able to pull in a lot of guys on the portal, and that unit up front was the focal point here. I think there's some big-time additions here, especially in size. If that physicality can improve, this is going to be a dangerous unit.
I think this is a unit that has some serious upside. They made some nice moves as well. Adding players, Tarquan from the Gators is a great add, 6'5", 320, very solid in pass block. Kingston as well, very solid play at left tackle. You move at guard, though. Nice versatility. I mean, you can move them around wherever you need to put them as well. Pregone from Wyoming is a very good add as well. I think this is a good unit. I think there's some nice players. Justin Diedich returning is a great veteran center at 6'2", 305. This unit's very solid. I think they're in a good spot for this USC team.
Obviously, the biggest concern coming into last year was how the defense would do, because under Riley at Oklahoma, the defenses were never really all that good. USC, though, a little bit of enhanced talent, and they lose 2 elite players and 2 elite 2 below 2 and Justin Blackman. They had 3 players who were just phenomenal. Those 2, and then Caitlin Bullock as safety, who had a staggering amount of interceptions. And they added 10 players from the portal, 5 on the defensive line. The run defense last year was just flat out poor. The pass defense, despite having 2 All-Americans, was 112. Way too many yards allowed there, especially in the game was against Utah. They're just getting absolutely hammered left and right. Bear Alexander, though, a player we figured would get on the field for Georgia last year. He had 2 TFL and a sack in the Natty. A very phenomenal late-time add for the Trojans, really try and beef up the middle here at defensive tackle. He does a great job of stacking and shedding in the run game. Picked up Jack Sullivan, a versatile player from Purdue. Anthony Lucas, 6'5", 290. Wasn't all that great from A&M, but was a former high-end 4-star. You matched that with Kion Barrs, a player I wanted from Arizona personally. He's got great experience and skill to kind of anchor that nose. Tyrone Talani was a good run stopper. A lot of people expect big things for him. They also have ex-number 1 recruit Corey Foreman, still looking to hit his stride. The defensive line, I think, has drastically improved this offseason with some key returnees mixed with some of these guys they picked up in the portal. A few coming out from the SEC ranks, Nick. I think Riley did a great job beefing up this part of the defense because they were not good last year despite having an elite player, Tui Pelotu.
This is a very talented unit that's improving. I think the defensive line had some good pieces last year. They lose Tuli Tuipulotu, who's a big loss, but Bear Alexander is an incredible add. This is a huge add late in the cycle. 6'3", 305, fantastic, impressive quickness, nice pursuit. Just a great player overall. Jack Sullivan's a versatile, good tackler coming over from Purdue. I like him a lot. Anthony Lucas, another good athlete as well. He comes over from A&M, didn't play a whole lot, but they're totally revamping this team, which I think is the big key here, is that they're working on this. I Lincoln Riley knows he had to revamp his defensive line. They struggled across the board last year, and it was one of the bigger parts and problems for this defense. But they bring in Keon Bars, Anthony Lucas, Bear Alexander, Jamali Muhammad as well. So they bring in a ton of different pieces here. Jack Sullivan. They made a ton of work. They brought in the piece they needed to. I think it's a really solid, positive improvement.
They also added Mason Cobb, a high-energy player who was a good pass rusher when utilized in the middle of this defense. Eric Gendry had a tough season, especially with his health, but he still has great size of 6'6", 200. Shane Lee, he played a lot. Really wasn't all that good for him. Rayshawn Davis, they were saying, has made some strides. And they also picked up a high-end 4-star and Tackett Curtis. So I think you look at the defensive line and the linebacking core, and they're starting to improve in terms of personnel. Same can be said for the secondary. Christian Roland Wallace from Arizona, a willing run defender, does a great job of using the sideline to trap receivers. 3 great players from the Wildcats they were able to snag. Kalen Bullock, of course, was elite in coverage, a great tackler, probably going to be a first-team All-American. Communication really needs to improve. Playmaking was actually a big plus because they had, a staggering amount of interceptions as a football team, 19 of them. They were 6th in FBS in takeaways. And if those dry up, that could certainly be a problem for them. Christian Pierce had a nice spring. Traquan Fagans comes up from Alabama. Max Williams, Bryson Straw. These guys are pretty poor. But reinforcements are on their way. Zion Branch, Damani Jackson battled health as freshmen. They're ready to compete. So I think the talent level top to bottom of this defense has significantly improved. We said coming into the year, Nick, last year, the main goal was just to learn how to play football again. Angles were poor under Clay Helton. Fundamentals were not good. And they were supposed to improve in this area last year. I don't think they did for the most part. So that's certainly something they have to continue to focus on. Because if these turnovers dry up, that's what they have to lean on as their fundamentals to get stops.
I agree. They need to find a way to be fundamentally sound in their tackling. They've added a lot of pieces here that really, I think, improve with that. Mason Cobb, Eric Gentry could have better seasons. Christian Rodon Wallace, Kalen Bullock, solid pieces in the second half as well. Zion Branch, Damari Jackson, they're freshmen who are looking to step up. The secondary had good pieces last year, and they looked good at times, which I think is really positive. But the numbers don't really reflect that. They did get a lot of interceptions, although that might be skewed against some of the weaker opponents. If this defense can get back to fundamentals, be able to wrap up, complete tackles, and get the right hits when they need to, this defense could definitely improve and help out balance with his team that was really unbalanced with their offense dominating their defense, not bailing them out. I think the defense will improve this year, which is why I'm confident that the Pac-12 will send USC to the playoffs. I just think there's just too much talent they've added not to make it to the playoffs. And adding a guy like Bear Alexander is your ultimate wild card. Such a talented player to get from Georgia.
Schedule over the back half of the season is quite tough, and that includes a Washington team, Nick, that is not getting probably as much attention as they should. This offense is also going to be a high-flying A-plus unit, first nationally in passing yards per game last season. Michael Penix, elite arm strength, really regained his confidence this past season, showcasing he's a great processor with some high IQ. Because after that ACL tear 2 seasons prior for Indiana, he came back and he was just flat out awful. He had more picks than touchdowns, did not seem confident one bit. Transfers over here, reunites with Kalen DeBoer. He was on fire. Romeo O'Duns, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk. This is a nasty receiving trio here. O'Duns is a very fluid player. Some good speed from McMillan and Polk. He can also stretch vertically. They're going to stretch these teams out, Nick, with the air raid. They're going to put up a lot of production. Dylan Johnson, a running back they added from Mississippi State, has some nice characteristics that really fit into this offense. Heavy zone runner for him. That returned 7 starters in total on this offense. Biggest problem is they averaged about 111 yards per game on the ground versus the 4 ranked opponents they played. So this offensive line needs to be a lot better. They're great in terms of pass production. A lot of volume from this passing attack. They only gave up 7 sacks. Roger Rosengarten at tackle is a very tough, great twitched athlete they have up front. The rest of the unit really needs to figure itself out, though. The 5th-year senior Nate Colepto probably going to slot in at left guard. Gary and Hatchett maybe at the right guard position. Julius Buelow played at guard in 2011 or 2021, that is, and he was awful for them. So they got some pieces to figure out. Troy Fortuna was really good in both facets. I think the tackle spots are really anchored down. The interior, though, needs to be penciled in a little bit. If they can do that, this offense can beat anyone in the country.
This offense is fantastic. I mean, the numbers are great with them. First in the nation in pass yards per game, second in the nation in yards per game, 7th in points per game, nearly 40 points per game. The rush yards per game was 69th in the nation, but I don't think it's that bad of a balance. I think they could find some more balance this year. Michael Penix is an exciting, fun athlete to watch at Washington. He's really got himself revitalized and found his career in a new spot. He was great at Indiana during the COVID year. I really loved watching him. Then the poor injury happened. But now he's back to full strength and really putting together a great career, certainly climbing up draft boards for the next draft cycle. 6'3", 214. I love Penix a lot. Great quarterback. Dylan Johnson, a nice, highly graded running back. Just your average, solid, good balanced running back. I like him a lot. I think he's a very talented piece. Romeo O'Duns, Jamie McMillan and Jillian Pork are all incredible players to have. Fantastic wide receivers. This unit, top to bottom, is very talented. These guys have great speed. They can move a whole lot. Jack Westover, solid producer at tight end. They also added some different pieces. Offensive line, again, is another worry here. I think they have a good tackle there in Rosengarten, who's a very talented, tough, hard-hitting tackle, 6'6", 303 for him. The rest of the unit has some solid pieces to plug in here and there. This offense should put up a ton of points this year. They should easily clear the 40 points per game mark, and I really like the talent they have.
If they want to meet their goals, though, the defense needs to be a little bit better, about 26 points per game. Certainly a little bit higher than anticipated. 100th against the pass. That was actually right on par. We expected a big step back. Tyler Gordon and then, Trent McDuffie. Those guys were two first-round NFL talents, and they lost them. They ended up losing 3 starters in total from 2021, where they ranked first in pass defense. Only 7 interceptions. They were 19th in sacks. So the pass rush certainly assisted the secondary, and that's going to be the story yet again. Braylon Trice, my defensive player of the year in the conference. A good speed rusher with some great length, nice motor, nice power. They're going to match him up with Zion Tupoloa Fatui, who was expected to be good, last year before his injury. He had to really recovery coming into the season. So obviously he wasn't at full health for most of the season. The interior, they have physical guys with some great feet. Ulumo, Ali, and then Tuli. These guys are both, Ali's 6'6", 340, Tuli 6'1", 307. So some nice gap eaters in the middle, pass rushes and all that great from the middle. And the depth may be tested there. But I think the linebacking core is just as talented. Idufan Uafashi really struggled in the back half of the year after his return from a major knee injury. He's overall been elite in his career, though. Only 11 games last 2 years, though. Has never played more than 9 games in a year, so relying on him to continue to be the instinctive hunter who can fire downhill for entirety of a season is going to be hard to rely on. Alfonso Tuapatoa, second leading tackler. Here's a sound player for him. Carson Bruner was good. And they picked up Raylan Goldford from USC, who was not really a good player for the Trojans. I think they got some talent and some depth here at linebacker in the defensive line. They have physical, tough players along with Trice and Fatui, who are going to provide a lot for them off the edge, Nick.
This is a defense that has some serious talent on the front side. I think this is a good edge rushing unit. Trice is fantastic, 6'4", 256. Tupiloto Fileti as well is a very talented player, 6'4", 250. He's a good player off the edge. They come off of violent intensity. They ranked 19th in sacks in the past season. They can certainly be top 15, top 10 this year. I think they have so much talent and edge rushing presence. It's really dominant in this conference. I like the interior as well of some nice talented pieces. The front part of this defense has a lot of big guys that are willing to get after the ball and make huge plays happen, which is very positive for a team like Washington that could really use it, considering they gave up 26 points per game last year.
23rd against the run, and again, 19th in sacks. So they certainly do some dirty work up front. Secondary, Jamar Muhammad, this is a good scheme for him. The transfer over from Oklahoma State, they're going to rely on him as a veteran. Asa Turner, Don Hampton, Markel Easton, a couple of good safeties there. 100th nationally last year. I think they're going to improve slightly, but nothing too crazy. It's obviously going to be very tough to figure out who's going to be that runner-up in this conference because, Oregon, they're looking to be even better than they were last season, Nick. Obviously, they started off the year awful. They lost by 46 points to Georgia, and everyone feels like if they played that game 10 weeks later, it would have been a much different outcome. And this offense, they really started to click after that. Bo Nix has always had that confidence. Finally let his skill show along with it, though. Proved to be a highly valuable rusher for them, a very loose athlete, showcased that great arm that can rip it in the tight windows. Was very proud of what Bo Nix was able to accomplish this past season. Kenny Dillingham departs, though. Junior Adams, Will Stein, they're going to be the offensive coordinators here. And this was an offense that was 9th in points per game, 6th in yards per game. They really showcased great balance all year long. The offensive line only allowed 5 sacks. I think it's one of the more underrated units. They do lose 4 starters up front, and the loss of Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, I think certainly maybe going to catch up with them. They picked up a Johnny Cornelius, though, from Rhode Island. A lot of people wanted him. Oregon got him. Stephen Jones, a veteran, I think is probably going to be much better here at right guard. Jackson Powers Johnson was an elite player. He's likely going to be their center. Josh Connerly, a former 5-star, is going to be at left tackle. Junior Engelaya from Texas, some good size, 6'6", 320. And then George Silva, a JUCO player they picked up. I'm very happy with the kind of reconstruction of this offensive line, so I'm not too worried with them. I even think they're a top 10 unit in college football to pair up with a deep supporting cast. Troy Franklin, Chris Hudson, some of the pass catchers they have. Trayshawn Holden played out wide a good bit at Alabama. Tez Johnson, the adopted brother of Nick's, 5'10", 150. Great player for Troy this past season. It was phenomenal after the catch. Terrence Ferguson was the 4th leading pass catcher at tight end. And they added some more speed in Gary Bryant from USC. And then just a few more guys they have, Nick. Running back Bucky Irving, a good finesse runner who's good at creating space. Only averaged about 12 carries per game this season. I think the offense will certainly benefit by giving him a heavier workload. And then Noah Whittington from Western Kentucky nearly got the same workload, wasn't as efficient, but he's a nice speed and slashing back at 194 pounds. I think this offense, we gave it an A+, and obviously it's hard to say that considering they lost to Georgia as bad as they did. But again, this is a far different unit they were about 11, 12 months ago, Nick.
This is an A+ unit. I love this offense top to bottom. Bo Nix is just a great player right now. He's really found his stride. I always knew he had that talent in him. He's got a bad deal at Auburn, in my opinion. Really got dealt a bad hand by the fans and the coaching staff. I know it's kind of that cliche meme to say, oh, he's focused, he's a Heisman contender. He is a Heisman contender. He's a legitimate Heisman contender. Bo Nix has found himself in a good spot. Great athlete, great arm, just great finesse. The turnovers continues to be an issue. Interceptions is still an issue with Bo Nix, but if you can focus on that and cut down the turnovers, that's the final piece of the puzzle to make Bo Nix a complete quarterback, in my opinion. I love what I've seen out of him. He returns to Oregon. He's in a great spot. I think he's going to continue to lead this offense in a high-flying facet. They had 284 yards per game through the air last year. I think they can certainly get that number higher. They had 500 yards per game total, which is an impressive number to have 215 rush yards per game as well. I like Bucky Irving. I like Knowing Whittingham. I think two of them together, solid duo. I think Irving is going to take the bulk of the carries here. He's a really good player. I think he'll be the go-to guy this year. The wide receiving unit has some solid pieces as well. Troy Franklin, Chris Hudson as well, another good player. Trayshawn Holden comes over from Alabama, good fit. Tez Johnson, he could be a total breakout player. I'm excited to see for him. They added Cornelius from Rhode Island. He was a huge get out of the portal. He was one of the biggest names in the portal, biggest jump from FCS to FBS in terms of talent add. I love that move for Oregon. I think he's a great piece to add. This offense top to bottom is very exciting. They've revamped the offensive line. They're getting deeper in the trenches, and I think Bo Nix is focused and ready to go. This offense will score a lot of points this year. It'll be fun to watch.
Much like Washington, the ultimate goals are going to come down to how good this defense is. And obviously with the air raid offenses and how fast they move, these are never going to be like elite defenses by any means. But Dan Lanning certainly has goals of accomplishing that, coming over from Georgia, obviously. 118th or 115th, that is, with only 18 sacks this past season. They returned 7 starters. The defense was a lot worse than I thought it would be. They're pretty sound against the run, weren't good against the pass, outside the top 70 in points and yards per game. Brandon Dorless, a versatile defensive lineman, natural feel for pass rushing. You're really going to need him to come into his own this year. Jordan Birch, a former 5-star coming off his best career season with South Carolina, is really taking some strides as a pass rusher. He's going to be leaned on heavily. The return of Pope Omavi, he moved last season, was a really good run defender in the past. Casey Rogers, a veteran around him. Keon Ware-Hudson, impressive tackler of the whole. And Mateo Uyungale, the addition off the edge should really help. A 5-star. USC seemed to be in on him. The Ducks swooped in and stole him away. I really like this D-line. The pass rush, as expected, was pretty awful, though. But they need to play to the level they're capable of. 31st against the run is solid. But that sack number needs to at least double this season, Nick. I think they're capable of doing so. And if they can't, then I expect the interior to really hold up a lot more. And that run yards per game number will be a lot higher. Defensive line's really good, though. Got to play better.
This is a good defensive line. They have some nice talent. They return some solid pieces. Brandon Dorless is a nice player at 6'3", 290. I like the size. Good, hard-hitting player. Could work on the production a little bit, but overall I think he's a solid player. Jordan Birch, really good player, had a great season. He's coming in at 6'6", 275. Good size. Overall, I think this is a good unit. Casey Rogers, another guy that's a good backup rotational piece. They have some nice talent coming in their recruiting class as well. This is a good defensive line unit that's going to get better. They looked, a little lack at times last year, but I think they have some talent here to produce and get those numbers up.
Look at the middle of the defense. Justin Jacobs comes over from Iowa, only 2 games last season. He's an explosive, instinctive player, though. Heavy hitter. Mace Funa's been around a long time. Really didn't do much last year like we figured he would. What's odd here is Jeffrey Bassett, Jamal Hill. These guys are converted safeties down to linebacker. These guys are pretty undersized. These guys are under 200 pounds each. I think this is a good group in terms of talent. You got Connor Scholl coming over as well. And, some of the new impactful recruits coming in will certainly get on the field eventually. I would say Lanning, likes what he has, but converting his safeties to play in the middle as undersized backer is certainly an interesting approach. What do you think that's going to accomplish for the Ducks this season?
I think there are some solid pieces here. I think Justin Jacobs is a good player to have. Nice hard-hitting linebacker. Excited to see what we can do. Mace Funa as well, another player that's been around. He's getting in there. Jeffrey Bassett being converted is interesting. It's kind of weird that they're moving a player like Bassett out, who I thought would have been better at linebacker. Kind of weird. Jamal Hill moves in there, impressive player in the slot, but he moves in there. I don't really like this whole kind of transitioning. This DB unit's kind of weak. They're trying to plug in pieces here that I just don't think fit the puzzle. It's kind of odd, in my opinion. They're trying to make the moves. They probably should have gone after the portal and attacked this position a little bit more. This is the biggest weak side for me, is this linebacking core and the secondary. They just don't think they have enough talent currently, but I do think there's enough talent on this team overall to help them compete.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the secondary does. The loss to Christian Gonzalez, Bennett Williams, not great, but Turquez Bridges, he was a real standout on the other side. Evan Williams, Bennett's brother, arrives from Fresno State. He was a great run defender. He's pretty sound for the Bulldogs. Tysheen Johnson was a very good safety for the Ole Miss Rebels. Brian Addison, he was great in coverage for the Ducks last season. And then Stevens got nearly 600 snaps last year. They do pick up some interesting players like Nico Reed from Boulder, Kyrie Jackson from Alabama, who was not very good. So I think that the other starting cornerback position outside of Bridges is certainly a bit of mystery. Very good upside for the secondary, though. I think that they certainly added some nice pieces. And then guys like Dante Manning, Jaleel Florence, former higher-ranked recruits, will somewhat have an impact, I think, this year. I think this defense is going to see monumental improvements this year under Dan Lanning. And if they don't, well, they're just not going to win football games.
I agree this defense is going to improve under Dan Lanning. He's a good defensive head coach, which is exciting for the Oregon team that needed a defensive-minded coach to be involved, in my opinion. I think their team has enough talent on defense to keep up and be runner-up to USC in this conference this year, which I'm excited about. But overall, I think they just are missing that final piece to compete with the Trojans in the conference, which is why they'll be second to them and lose them late in the season. They do have a Heisman-level quarterback. They have a very talented wide receiver and running back room, good offensive line. I just worry about the pieces and transitioning for the secondary in the middle of the defense.
Now, the biggest sleeper in this conference is Oregon State. Obviously, they play a very soft schedule, but this team's no fluke by any means. Jonathan Smith has done a great job here with this program. The offense last year, virtually one-dimensional. They still put up 33 points per game. I was wrong, though. I thought that he'd be able to do much better with his quarterback room last season. Ended up not being able to do that one bit. But DJ Uiagalelei comes over, a guy with some good size, 6'4", 235, that has value as a runner. He's a guy that really struggled to be consistent, confident, lacked timing, never seemed to have control of the offense at Clemson. Really good passer when on point, but when he isn't, he's very, it's very far and few, I'd say, when he is on point, though. Plenty for Smith to work with, though, here. I think Uiagalelei is in for a pretty solid season. But the concern here is that the receiving core. Luke Musgrave was 6th on the team in yards, played only 2 games. Jack Velling, 6'4", 230, had some solid production. Anthony Gold has some good speed, 5'8", 164. Cialis Bolden, 5'8", 152. Trevor Pope didn't play last year. He's expected to be on the field a one bit, only 6'2", 177. Jeremiah Noga is a redshirt sophomore, only had 2 receptions. And then true freshman Zachary Card's only 165 pounds also. This receiving room significantly lacks options. Worst size probably in America from a receiving core. Nick, if they didn't have this physical offensive line, a dynamic running game, this would be a horrible passing attack. But I think they're really able to fire off play action here, and that might just be the saving grace. And that actually might be a benefit for them, as they have that speed moving vertically while they're able to pound the rock at you.
It certainly is interesting that this wide receiver unit is weak. DJ Uiagalelei comes over here. I'm excited to see what he can do. He leaves Clemson, a bit of a lower key role out here in Corvallis. Not a whole lot of media attention and pressure for him, in my opinion. Going to be a more relaxed, focused role at 6'4", 235. I picked him in the Heisman in 2021. Obviously, I missed the mark there, but I thought he had all the raw talent in the world to do so. And I still think he has all the raw talent in the world to be a Heisman-level quarterback. He just has not been focused at Clemson, in my opinion. Now he heads out west to new opportunities, and I think he's got an exciting chance here to really make a name for himself. Damian Martinez is an exciting back who I'm super excited about. Very high on him as well. I think there's a ton of talent in Martinez. Nice speed, nice burst overall. I think he adds a new dynamic for this offense. Very talented running back to have. Potentially, very talented player in regards to breaking out. I think he's going to be a huge breakout player this year. Very excited to see what Martinez can do. Yes, the wide receiving core is a little weak. I think Anthony Gold's a good player at the X. Cialis Bolden in the slot's a very talented player. But like you said, play action is going to be the focus. They have 2 good tight ends as well, and a very solid offensive line that can make a lot of blocks.
Yeah, the offensive line returns 4 starters. The left side features Joshua Gray and Ellie Bloomfield. These guys were really good run blockers, despite only being 288 and 304 pounds, respectively. Jake Levengood at center, Talise Fuaga. These guys, phenomenal players last year, elite players for the Beavers. Marco Brewer's going to slide in between them at right guard. He struggled a good bit last year. He was a liability, hoping to get him coached up, the homegrown Corvallis kid. They're going to be paving the way for Damian Martinez. They got some good initial burst in the hole, good vision in the open field, really thrives on those outside zone runs, that is. Jam Griffin unexpectedly just transferred a couple weeks ago. Deshaun Fenwick, the power back, is 6'2", 226. It's going to be him and Martinez as the 1-2 punch early on in the season. Obviously, this is a run game that's phenomenal behind this offensive line. And again, Nick, I really think they could actually be very solid off play action this year. If a nice quarterback and DJ who could make those throws to these undersized pass catchers, even though the size is awful, I think it might really play into their hands this season, and opponents could really have a headache. So it's not the worst thing in the world, especially if these guys can continue to improve up front.
I agree. I think it's certainly possible they can use the play action to their advantage. Like you said, Martinez is such a talented player. He's my breakout player of the year for the conference. I think he's got great burst and is really an exciting running back here to step up and be a huge member of this offense. This offense made the right moves, in my opinion. I'm excited to see what they can do.
Now, the defensive side of the ball, expected the Beavers to be sound in this area last year. Didn't think they'd be 16th and 15th in points per game and rush yards per game allowed last year. Very good work here. They lose Omar Spates to LSU. It's pretty massive. They only get back 5 starters, lose 4 of the top 5 tacklers, and lose 3 starting DBs, both their corners. Pass rush really wasn't expected to do much last year and had exactly 20 sacks each of the past 2 seasons, so that's kind of really on the money. Andrew Chatfield showed up from Florida, had 20 hurries, didn't add much meaningful production though. Riley Sharp, they ended up moving him over to tight end. He was one of their top sack getters each of the past 2 seasons, so that's not great. James Rawls really stepped up though. I think he had double-figure tackles for loss as a defensive tackle. Really good run defender though. Joe Golden, he's gonna have to really step up. Semzi Solani didn't really play at all. So they don't really have much experience here in this defensive line. I think they're pretty happy. I think it's overall a good unit. Guys like Isaiah Hodgins were pretty solid. So we'll see what happens with this D-line. The sack numbers I don't really expect to improve much. They don't have Avery Roberts or, again, Spates at linebacker. Entire tenure under Jonathan Smith, he really had one of those two. Marcanis Arnold at 5'11", 236, really struggled as a tackler. Him and John Miller, these guys are going to be forced into action with Mason Tufaga from Utah. And then Calvin Hart coming over from Illinois brings a little bit of experience. Middle of the defense, pretty concerning. The defensive line is as well because that production is just not evident. But I think, the way the scheme works and how Rawls is very effective as an interior defender might really bail this unit out.
They certainly do lose production, which is a concerning problem. Omar Spates leaving for LSU is a big loss, but I think there is some talent overall. It's going to be a next man up sort of mentality. These guys are going to jump up and be ready to go. I think they have a lot of nice returning pieces. The defensive line is a lot of guys that are just returning their experience, redshirt seniors, juniors, guys that have been in the system for a while. Easton Makakis Arnold as well as a nice interior linebacker. I like to see what he can do. Andrew Chatfield, nice hard-hitting linebacker. So he can do Joe Golden off the right side. I think he can get after the quarterback a few times and have some good production there, certainly. I am concerned, but they have a nice next man up mentality in Oregon State. They're going to kind of put together and find guys who are going to make it work.
In the secondary, they have virtually no experience back at corner. Ryan Cooper, that was a veteran who was very admirable in the slot. Keaton Aladapo was a great player in run support and in coverage, sure thing. All first-team conference player there at safety. Alton Julian is a player I'm ready to watch this season. I think he's really going to impress in the back end for them. But overall, this is a defense that really doesn't scream much in terms of talent coming into the season. But I think it's certainly going to be big in helping them win 10 games. I think they could easily sneak their way, maybe even into the CFP, just the way the schedule is aligned for the Beavers. No fluke, though. This is a good football team, top to bottom. Look at the defending conference champions in the Utah Utes, and obviously this is a team that's not getting enough love. And, they played a lot of close games last year, so it certainly makes a lot of sense. They kind of got bailed out at times in that game against USC at home where they were just getting lit on fire. And, the defense has certainly got some of its issues, but the offensive side of the ball, they're getting back a good bit of experience here. 6 starters are back. Cam Rising coming off a torn ACL. He's expected to be a full go this year, though. Plenty of toughness, does very well as a runner, plays above his size. Good vertical passer. Velocity is below average, though. The accuracy and touch is certainly evident. Brant Kuthi, he's back, a versatile tight end that's used in a variety of alignments. He got hurt early on last year. Really good route runner, some good body control, 6'2", 222. He doesn't exactly have the top-end speed or the strength to be a highly coveted NFL prospect, but he's a really good pass catcher as well. Top 2 players on this offense coming off torn ACLs, Nick. That's not optimal one bit. But one good news thing for them is Jaquindon Jackson, a converted quarterback, was great over the last 1 to 2 months for them as a runner. Great downhill player who's got great toughness and physical presence. A pure zone runner used on inside zone a bit. Has some nice vision. He loves the spin move as well. They're comparing him with Michael Bernard, who briefly flirted with the portal. A versatile player who's really good after catch. He can make plays in space. So I think, they don't have the deepest of supporting cast by any means. They do return guys like Money Parks, Devon Lee, who are standouts for the wide receiver group. And they did add a handful of transfers like Emery Simmons, Micah Pittman to try and beef up the receiving room. But they get the most out of these starters, Nick. And then obviously Jackson, of course, transferring over from the quarterback position was big for them. They're going to be really good here. I've always said this offense is just great in terms of balance. 50th in passing yards per game, 11th in terms of running the ball. The balance is as good as it gets here for the Utes, and that's why they continue to be incredibly successful.
This is a very underrated offense. It's not getting a whole lot of love. They return a lot of veterans, very experienced unit. Yes, it's concerning that Kuthi and Rising are 2 best players coming off torn ACLs, but Cam Rising is a perfect leader in the locker room. This guy cares about Utah football. He's just dedicated to the program. He has the whole program built on his back. He loves playing football at Utah. and he's a very talented quarterback to boot. Good on the ground, good through the air. Overall talented, versatile player. Brent Cooley is a very good tight end. Getting a lot of love in the draft for a reason. He has so much talent and potential. I love what Brett Cooley can do. I'm very excited to see what he can do this year. Yes, he's coming off the injury, but overall, he's a very talented player that has a lot left in the tank. Micah Bernard's a very good back. We loved him last year. He looked good. Very versatile player. Nice blocker. Jaquinta Jackson converting from quarterback. Very good player. Great in the later part of the season. Excited to see what he can do. So I'm not as worried about this offense. It's certainly concerning that their two best players returning from torn ACLs, but there's a ton of talent across the board in this offense, and I'm excited to see what they can produce.
The offensive line, they returned 3 starters. Keaton Bills was a good player for them. He might play in the pros, but they don't produce a lot of NFL guys. It's really just based off size and physicality, and that's certainly something they continue to impose on this conference, and it's soon to be the Big 12. On the defensive side of the ball, same thing goes for them. The defensive line is incredibly deep. Guys like Junior Tafuna, Van Fellinger, these guys are phenomenal. Jonas Ellis really stepped up. Connor O'Toole is an impactful player. Only 4 defensive linemen drafted since 2015, but same thing goes here. They have good size, great toughness, and that's why they're 18th against the run over the last 4 games of the year. They're just elite against the run, to not give up much. Lander Barton, a linebacker, was expected to get on the field of how high of a recruit he was. He was strong. He was impactful. He was really good against the run. A very nice, tough tackler there. Karen Reed, more of a veteran that was really good in all facets. Phenomenal producer there. I think this front 7 is great. It's obviously not going to get a lot of love in the national grand scheme, but Morgan Scalley has himself a heck of a unit here. Junior Tafuna, Van Fellinger, these guys are phenomenal ball players. They could potentially find themselves playing on Sunday. Nick, what do you think needs to continue to improve here? Not much really for this defense, but they do need to set the tone a little bit more because the secondary might struggle a bit this year.
This defense has some nice play pieces. There are certainly some struggles. Defense was overall pretty well rounded last year, 21.4 points per game, which is a pretty good number. Junior Tuafolo as well is a really solid piece on the interior at 6'4", 304. I think the secondary solid as well. Cole Bishop is a really good physical player. He lays the boom. Nice hitter. I like him a lot. He's kind of your highlighting piece here. Lander Barton as well is a nice linebacker. They replace a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball, which is certainly an issue. They lose some nice talent at linebacker, but I think this is a good unit that's pretty well. A lot of veterans, next man up mentality there in Utah. These guys are talented. They're hard hitting. They've won the conference the past 2 years in a row, so it's certainly possible they can win it a third time.
Obviously, Clark Phillips departs at corner. Jatavis Broughton, though, is a very admirable performer. Zimei Vaughn was really stout in coverage. They're expecting him to be big this year. And like you said, Cole Bishop, a physical pass rusher, really lays the boom, a nice versatile controller. Big fan of his. The biggest reason why I have them going 8-4 is just the offense struggles. When they struggle, the defense doesn't seem to do the heavy lifting for them. That was the case in the Florida, Penn State, and UCLA games. I think that seemed to be true. They will lose to the tougher opponents this year. I'll give them an early season win over Baylor because I don't think they're going to go 7-5. The schedule is brutal, though, when you look at the road games. We obviously don't have it on screen, but if you glance at the schedule, some very tough games here. I think they're certainly going to fall in. And this secondary allowed a lot of big plays last year, especially in those USC games, UCLA game. Even they were giving up some big-time completions there. So I think 8-4, a mark here. Kind of disrespectful for the Utes, but I think this is going to be a bit of a tone down here for Kyle Whittingham and crew. UCLA, 8-4 as well. I certainly think this is a team that can certainly do a little bit more damage than people are acknowledging, even though Vegas has their over-under at 8. Colin Schlee comes over from Kent State. He's very creative of angles, very good on the move, an athletic, willing runner. I think this is a player who's a very crafty, good fit for the offense, kind of like DTR was in a sense. And I think Carson Steele's also a carbon copy bit of Zach Charbonnet. Hard to bring down, does a great job sidestepping defenders. Really good balance at 6'2", 225, some good vision, great strength. They call him a pure bulldozer. Obviously, Dante Moore is going to battle with Schlee, incoming 5-stars, really tough in the pocket at quarterback. But I think Steele and Schlee are, very good, identical replacements to that of DTR and Zach Charbonnet. And I think that's really going to allow this offense to thrive. Probably not to that 39-point-per-game tune, but I certainly think they're going to be highly efficient and effective.
This is a good unit that has some nice, talented pieces. I think Colin Schlee, Dante Moore, they battle out. I think Dante Moore is going to get the start. Highly rated 5-star coming in. Very talented player, 6'3", 210. Very excited to see what he can do. Carson Steele, good running back. Nice player, hard to bring down. Good job beating tackles. Some solid pieces in the wide receiving room as well. It's a bit of a week, but they added some transfers that certainly help out. A good offensive line unit that has some nice, good pass blocking pieces. This offense scored 39.2 points per game last year. They had 500 yards per game as well. I don't think they'll have nearly 40 points per game. They'll be closer to 35, but I think they are very talented. Chip Kelly is calling the plays with the spread option offense. You're really going to get a ton of points there. He's put together a pretty good offense here.
You look at that offensive line, they really built on physicality last year with a lot of veterans. They have some big pieces to replace. Kadondre Conta arrives from Old Dominion. He wasn't really that great at left tackle. It's some nice size, though, 309 pounds. Spencer Holstage from Purdue. He was an elite pass blocker for the Boilermakers. He's going to stay at left guard. Duke Clemens was a great center for the Bruins. Jake Wiley comes over from Colorado. Garrett DeGiorgi back at right tackle out of 37 pressures. That's not good one bit. Physicality is the name of the game for Kelly, though. More bad than good for this offensive line. And then wide receiver, though, a few in-conference transfers. Really kind of beef up what was a weak wide receiver room. Joe Sturvant was great for California as a redshirt freshman. Kyle Ford made some good plays for USC. Casimir Allen was expected to be a great underneath weapon. Certainly needs to do better in his yards per catch number. I was like 8 or 9 last year. Logan Loya, a veteran who's back as well. So I think top to bottom, this is a very sound offense. They weren't very deep last season. It was really built off that quarterback and that running back they had, who are now going to make some hopefully long careers in the NFL. That's going to have to be the story again this year, Nick, regardless of who's that quarterback and, regardless of how many snaps Steele ends up getting in the backfield. These guys are really going to have to carry this unit.
I agree. This is a unit that is very talented. I like this offensive line a lot. I like this offense top to bottom. This is a good unit. They lost a lot, right? They lost DTR, Charbonnet, which are big losses, but I think they did plug and play good pieces to step up and make this offense competitive in the Pac-12.
I think the defensive side of the ball is one of the most excited to watch. They returned 8 starters, allowed 29 points per game last year. They weren't very good in anything other than the run, which actually was not all that shocking when you see who they added. Gabriel and Grayson Murphy from North Texas. You figured that'd be good for them, but they ended up being, phenomenal players who were physical and flexible off the edge. Jay Tawai, he wasn't all that great, but has some good experience on the interior. Gary Smith at 320 was a great run defender. David Magna, that is, 315. Keanu Williams, a 300-pounder from Oregon. And then veteran Carl Jones, he can come off the edge of his hand in the dirt, or as an outside linebacker. And one guy who's a phenomenal outside backer is Liatu Latu. He was an elite pass rusher, showcased exceptional quickness and length. He has some nice hands, a variety of different moves. Darius Mosasu didn't have anywhere near the production as he did in Hawaii in 2021, but he was a force nonetheless. Certainly had his struggles versus the run, and he needs to be a more consistent tackler. But he was an efficient pass rusher when unleashed. I think I'm pretty happy with what the Bruins have here, Nick, which is crazy to say because this defense really didn't look all that human on defense last year. But the defensive line's deep. They have size. They have pass rushing ability. And that dude in the middle, and Darius, is just phenomenal. He's an experienced veteran who's going to play with a lot of energy. I think this is a very solid part of this football team, one of the more underrated front sevens in the country.
This is a very solid unit top to bottom. Gabriel and Grayson Murphy are two very talented players off the edge. I like to see what both of them do this year. Latu is a very exciting player. I really think I'm high on him this year. I think he's going to have a huge potential to put up a ton of numbers. He's going to be a dominant defensive force. I think he's a perfect player to have at outside linebacker. Very good in the backfield. Darius Messiah as well. The production kind of dropped off, but he's a force there. I think he's going to get back to his consistent form. Very talented player top to bottom.
In the secondary, kind of figured they'd be a big liability, 118th against the pass. Honestly, figured they'd probably be worse than that. And there's not many spots left to give up. But Jalen Davies wasn't all that bad for him. John Humphrey certainly had his struggles. Devin Kirkwood, he struggled a good bit down the stretch, but a player that's been really good at times during his first 2 years. Kenny Churchill, a veteran at safety who also needs to play better. Jordan Anderson comes over, though. He was a great player for Bowling Green, has insane versatility. They used him everywhere, hoping he can provide a boost. I see vast improvements for this defense top to bottom. Hope I'm not asking for too much. 8-4, though, for me, Nick. I think this UCLA team's very quiet coming into the season. And if this offense can stay at the same mark they were last year in terms of production, I don't see why they can't be at the top of the conference come December.
I think 8-4 is a fair mark for this team. They're a very talented team on offense that plugs in the right pieces to replace those that have departed top to bottom. This is a good offense that can put up a ton of points. The defense has some solid pieces as well. I think the front seven is very underrated, one of the better units in the country that people are not talking about. It very talented unit that can put up a ton of points, put up a ton of sacks, as well as cut down on the amount of points given up. The secondary worries me a little bit, but overall, this is a good defense and a pretty good UCLA team.
Looking at the California Golden Bears, Justin Wilcox took for his job this year. He's going to have to do it with a pretty bleak quarterback room. Sam Jackson, Ben Finley, these aren't bad players by any means, but Jackson's probably going to be a guy that converts to wide receiver. Finley, I thought he showcased some good touch and IQ in his 2 starts last year. Jay Knott, though, a true dual threat back, great asset as a pass catcher. I expected him to get on the field last year, considering he was a 4-star recruit. And we are at a school like this, you need to get on the field. Smooth cutter while moving forward, very good burst and very shifty. I'm a big fan of Jay Knott this year. I think the receiving core is pretty solid. Brian Hightower, Jeremiah Hunter, these are 2 solid, very good players for the Bears, and also picked up a transfer from Illinois as well. One of the nation's worst pass blocking units, though, in terms of offensive line, Ben Coleman, he was probably their best player. He transfers out. Guys like Brian Driscoll, Matthew Cindric, though, are back. They don't really have much size. They're mostly under 300 pounds. Some good height, though. Like Everett Johnson, for example, 6'7". 24 points per game a season ago. These numbers really weren't all that great. Jack Plummer, he was able to produce as a passer, but they did not improve one bit like I thought they would. Jake Spavital, those coming over to coach this offense up, preaching some speed, some space, numbers in the run game. Overall, though, I think this offense is not going to be much better. And it's really going to be on the heels of the defense, Nick. I think this is a very sound unit that returns 9 starters. David Reese comes over trying to help out this pass rush. Xavier Carlson, Miles Jernigan, some veterans. Not very deep, though, on this defensive line. Some very poor players, especially against the run, where they allowed about 150 yards per game. But Jackson Sermon in the middle, playing under his son Peter, is probably going to be the guy that really changes things for him with some great reaction time, a great diagnoser. This Cal team, very interesting. I think the defense overall is probably why they can win some games. And I think they're going to upset somebody this year. I just don't know who it is. And that's because of this secondary. Jeremiah Irby was very impressive as a true freshman. Patrick McMorris can really anchor down the slaughter. Strong safety comes over from San Diego State. Noah Williams, he's a good player. And Craig Woodson, a versatile player who really struggled in coverage, but was great in the box. Daniel Scott departing, of course, doesn't help. I think the defensive side of the ball for Cal is why they're going to be able to win games again this year, Nick. The offense, I'm just not really hopeful for it. Is Wilcox going to be returning for 2024, regardless of the conference they're in?
This is a team that has some talent on offense. Wilcox, I think, is a good coach. I think he can coach for his job. He's a very good defensive coach, elite defensive coordinator. If he does lose his job, certainly in a program in the future, a program like Alabama could certainly be involved in that in the future. The offense, I think Jaden Ott's a very good player. Brian Hightower, Jeremiah Hunter are all very talented pieces. Offensive line has some nice plug-in pieces as well. The defense is good. I think the front seven's good. Jackson Sermon's a very good hard-hitting player. David Reese, a nice versatile edge player. He struggled to help. He can be healthy. That's important. The secondary returns a lot of places. Patrick McMorris is a good player. Overall, I like the secondary. I think Craig Woodson is another good player. This defense is solid top to bottom. They're hard-hitting and a very good unit. I think this Cal team could certainly be an underrated team to watch this year.
I do need to take a step back because the pass defense was 123rd in FBS. They do have some nice talent in the back end, though, so Wilcox really needs to get them in tune this year. I think they're going to be at least 60th or better because I think the talent is there. If not, though, this defense is not going to be able to really accomplish much or they're giving up yards like that. Looking at Arizona, a team that I gave an F defense, that is, to because I just don't think that they did very good improving. They obviously got hammered in the portal. They pick up Justin Flo, who's really struggled to stay on the field. I think Russell Davis is a quicker defensive lineman who's pretty solid. Traydon Stuggs, Isaiah Taylor, some solid players in the secondary. Overall, they're just an F defense, so we're going to stay away from it. The offense, though, is really going to be able to uplift them this year. Jaden DeWar, a big fan of his. The escapability. He's a great runner, evades pressure very well. Good arm strength. A nice playmaker who's always on the move, really throwing the run. 11 of his 13 picks, though, came between the numbers. So let's see him tone it down through the middle this year. Michael Wiley, Jonah Coleman. I think they're going to be a pretty solid running back duo this upcoming year. Great receiving core. Jacob Cowling, great vertical speed, a very shifty route runner. Tatoria McMillan, good size, combined with some burst and route running skills, 6'5", 205. This was a former high-ranked 4-star. I think a lot of people are probably going to want this guy at the end of the year. Keon Burnett, that tight end, some good speed, real good option down the seam. Only had a couple of grabs last season, but they're definitely getting him on the field this season. And I think the offensive line, led by Jordan Morgan and guard Jonas Alenia, are going to be much better for them this season. A freshman All-American and Jonah, and then Morgan. He has good punch and length. These guys are both 6'6", 320-plus pounds. I think the offensive side of the ball is going to be incredibly fun to watch this year. I think you'll see them boost maybe from 31 points per game, maybe up to 35 or 36. But the defense is not going to do anything for them, Nick, so that's why 6-6 is a reasonable prediction for Jed Fish's crew. But if they can be a little bit better on defense, we might have something cooking.
Defense is very poor. Justin Flo, a nice add, but overall this defense is just terrible top to bottom. The numbers were so bad last year. I expect numbers to be similar. If they can find a way to improve, it would be great for this Arizona team to be involved and be a little more competitive. The offense is talented. The unit has some good pieces overall. Jaden DeLora is a good quarterback. I like him. Smart runner, good mobility, evades pressure well. Michael Wiley, Jonah Coleman are very talented pieces in the running back room. Jacob Cowling, Tatoria McMillan as well, another very talented wide receiving room, top to bottom. So I think this offense is fun to watch. They should be able to score a lot of points this year. They're a pretty good unit that has some nice, good pieces, which is really bailing out what is a terrible defense.
Look at Arizona State. A lot of people expect them to be bottom of the barrel this year, but I think Kenny Dillingham in his first year is going to do very solid. Bayou Baldwin, an offensive coordinator, hasn't really did much since 2016 and left Eastern Washington, but he's got a nice little group to work with here. Drew Prine comes over from Notre Dame. He was probably an above-average player. Throws high with a nice touch, some good toughness in the pocket. He's got enough mobility as well. I like what they did at running back. Cameron Scapito comes over from Sacramento State. Remember Evan Hull last year from Northwestern? That's the type of player he is, very versatile, has elusive downhill skills. I think his receiving core is phenomenal. Elijah Badger, a physical player, has some great effort after the catch. They ended up getting Jordan Tyson here late. He had a knee injury in November. He has good speed. He's a real playmaker on special teams, a deep threat that makes plays downfield. A big loss there for the Buffaloes. Xavier Gilroy, I was happy with his tape from Idaho State. Great speed. He really pulls away after the catch. Jalen Conyer is one of the top returning tight ends in the country. Also really good after the catch. Led the nation in missed tackles, really fights through contact. And Troy Almieri, guy has some nice size, 6'3", 221. Also a smooth route runner from Texas. They are incredibly deep, I'd say, here at the wide receiver position. Pine's going to have plenty of options to work with. Even Jaden Rashada, if he gets on the field. Ben Coleman coming over from Cal. Had an injury in the spring. He's going to miss the entire year. Not good news for this offensive line because I don't think they're going to be good one bit. Glass had at left tackle with 37 pressures allowed. Aaron Frost, he hasn't played in 2 years. He comes over from Nevada. So a lot of stuff going on here. They also have a JUCO guy, Max Inacor. So he's got a good experience on both sides. The offensive line, though, I think is going to plague them this year. Love the receiving core, though, and I even think some of these guys in the backfield get involved. Offensive expectations for me a little high, but I think Dillingham can get it done. You just see what he did at Oregon. I think this is going to be a very sound season for the Sun Devils, though.
This is a fun offense. Kenny Dillingham was a great hire, in my opinion. The youngest coach in Power 5 college football. Fun, exciting coach. I like him a whole lot. I think Dillingham was a great hire. Drew Pine, could be a great quarterback to lead this offense. Jaden Rashada as well. One of those two quarterbacks is going to get the reins. Both are very talented. The running back room has some talented pieces. Wide receiving room is very talented top to bottom. Jordan Tyson, good player. Troy Omari as well from Texas, very talented player. The offensive line is poor. I'm worried about that, but I think this is a fun unit that could put up a lot of points this year.
And you look at the defensive side of the ball, expected a big step back this past season. 104th in points and yards per game, though, allowed was certainly not expected. They forced only 5 fumbles, recovered 1. Horrible numbers, 120th in sacks. BJ Green, though, a chaotic pass rusher, dropped about 20 pounds. They really think he's going to be a great player for them. He really tore up spring ball, versatile player. Clayton Smith, a former high-end recruit. He's an explosive player. Him and Prince Dorba come over from Red River Schools. Solid run stopper for Texas was Dorba. Travion Brown from Washington State. He was one of the better tacklers in the country. They don't have much of the linebacking groups, though. Ro Torrance, Jordan Clark, Chris Edmonds, Xavier Alford. Some talented players, I'd say, in the secondary. They're going to have to be much better in that area, and I think they certainly will, especially when it comes to playmaking. Overall, I think it's going to be a bit of a tougher year. Only get the 6 starters back. They lose their top 4 tacklers. A good bit of turnover here with numerous adds in the portal. I think defensive side of the ball certainly going to let them down a good bit, but this offense will keep them in games. 5-7 for me. It's far different from what people are saying. A lot of 2-10s out here for Arizona State. I just don't see it, though.
I don't see them bottoming out like you. I think they are going to be a 5-7 sort of team, 4-8 maybe. Potentially the defense has some turnover, some decent pieces. BJ Green's a nice chaotic pass rusher. Torrance coming back, Jordan Clark coming back, Chris Edmonds another good piece to return. But overall, the defense just kind of lacks those talented pieces they need. This team is just, an average team going through a transition here. They have a good coach, though. I think Dillingham was the right hire.
Washington State. They have a good bit of turnover also. We, kind of criticize them for their portal approach, picking up a lot of JUCO guys and guys from, schools worse than JUCO, I think. I don't even know. But Washington State, they do return Cam Ward, which is big for them. A guy who certainly has some nice natural arm talent. Nakia Watson is back. Jalen Jenkins in the backfield. The run game obviously was quite efficient for them. 26 points per game, though, for this air raid offense wasn't great. They do lose their offensive coordinator. Ben Arbuckle's going to step into that role. Great work in the portal, though, because they had a lot of their guys depart at wide receiver. Kyle Williams was a consistent player at UNLV. Josh Kelly for Fresno State showcased at 21. He could be a good weapon for Jake Haener. Isaiah Hamilton didn't have much of a role last year, but he was at times a big playmaker for the Spartans. And then they get Lincoln Victor, Leighton Smithson back. The offensive line, though, they were 126 in sacks allowed. Jarrett Kingston, their best player, transferred to USC. They get most of these guys back, Christian Hilborn, Connor Gomes, but for the most part, they're really not that good. They're really going to lean on some of these guys from the FCS level to try and beat up their offensive front. I just don't see it, though. This air raid offense, they don't do much up front. I think they'll have, again, a nice passing offense, and the backfield will kind of be around the same it was last year. This offensive line that really holds them back.
This offensive line that is a struggle unit for this team. Cam Ward's a very exciting quarterback, great quarterback, really had a good year during his first year at the Power 5 level, came over from Incarnate Word, excited to see what he can do. The wide receiving unit's great. They added a ton of pieces through the portal. They really hit the portal hard. That was their positive portal work, wide receiving unit. The offensive line, though, is terrible. 119th in tackles for loss allowed, 126 in sacks. Just a struggling unit that really needs to find a pulse. The running back room has some talented pieces to return as well. This offense, they need to find a better way to put up more points. They're an air raid offense that just struggled to put up points last year. 26.1 points per game. An air raid offense is just a pathetic number. They got to find a way to get more points on the board.
Looking at the defensive side of the ball, I expected this unit to be heavily improved last year, but 38th in points per game certainly was a bit of an unexpected mark. The pass rush has great 2 deep on the depth. Ron Stone was an all-PAC performer at 21. Quinn Rolfe ended up stepping up kind of in his absence because he didn't really have the same production this past year. Rolfe did, though. Brennan Jackson, some stellar production. Andrew Edston, he's a nice pass rusher. He was much more sturdier against the run. I think overall the defensive line on the interior, though, lacks experience and impact. Middle of the defense, Kyle Thornton, pretty average performer. Depth isn't great here either. The guys they picked up in the portal, Ahmad McCullough from Maryland was awful. Devin Richardson, showed some flashes with Texas and was at New Mexico State. They do lose Francisco Mioga, though, and Deion Henley. In the secondary returns, Charles Smith-Wade, he really evolved in one of the nation's top corners. I definitely think that Sam Watkins is a phenomenal player, too, as, a box safety. Really thrived. He was elite versus the run. Nice, masterful tackler. Top to bottom, though, I think this defense is going to take a slight step back. They lost 17 players in the portal, 5 starters, but they were able to pick up players from, like Saddleback College and, community college ranks. So they should be just fine, right?
It is an interesting approach, adding players from community colleges below JUCO level. I just don't really understand the whole process there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The defense is just a mismatch of pieces that are being put together that don't really seem to have any continuity. These guys are kind of just adding random players from across the country that really don't seem to make a lot of sense. The front 7 was solid. I thought the defensive line had some solid pieces, but outside of that, I think this defense is just weird. They were not bad. 22.9 points per game is a pretty good number last year, actually, when you think about it. I figure it'd be a lot higher. I expect a huge regression from this defense. They just plugged in a lot of random pieces. They got hammered in the portal, lost 17 players, only added 5. Tough year for this defense, certainly.
They lost nearly 40 players in the portal total. Looking at the Colorado Buffaloes, obviously, Deion Sanders was a prized possession that a lot of people wanted this past offseason. Figured he'd make sense at Georgia Tech. Didn't look like they had enough money for it. Colorado, they didn't even have enough money for it, but they're going to figure it out. He's going to inherit and complete roster turnover, and a lot of people are going to hype this team up, and I think for good reason. They pick up Shedeur Sanders, who's not just Deion's son. This is a former 4-star quarterback who's a smart player with an impressive arm, nice tight window thrower. Alton McGaskill was a phenomenal running back for Houston, 21 with, almost 1,000 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns. Kavasier Smoke was a pretty reliable number 2 at Kentucky. He's starting to get to go this year. They added some great speed in Jimmy Horn and Xavier Weaver from USF at wide receiver, and then Savion Washington falling over his offensive coordinator, his head coach, that is, Sean Lewis, who takes a lesser job to be calling plays here, which I think they did a great job with his staff because Charles Kelly is also the defensive coordinator. Savion Washington, though, 6'8", 342 at tackle. This was a great player. You can really watch his Florida tape or his Georgia tape to show that he has a finisher's mentality, really latches on and drives. Tyler Brown comes over from Jackson State. Great pass blocker, aggressive player. The biggest problem here, though, is they were not good. They ended up losing 19 players in the portal. So, obviously, the depth is certainly going to be a little iffy. 127th in points, 128th in yards, 115th or worse in passing and rushing the ball. Obviously, I'm very excited for this offense. I really want to see how they gel together, Nick, because, again, they do have some nice speed, some veteran presence, and former production at running back. And the quarterback is not bad either. Very underrated player. What are the realistic expectations for the offense? I know we're about to do our TCU preview, and I have them putting up a good amount of points. But at the same time, it just doesn't seem realistic, even though I think they can accomplish a lot on this side of the ball.
It's tough to get a real pulse on this offense and this Colorado team as a whole as they bring in a complete rebuild overnight. Deion Sanders steps in, makes a huge move. This is an interesting move for him going to Colorado. I like the move for him. It's very bold from this program that's been a bottom barrel program for the last 20 years. They get great staff in Sean Lewis and Charles Kelly. So overall, the rebuild happens in a snap here. I like it a lot. They added a ton of pieces. Shedeur Sanders is a really talented quarterback. He isn't just Deion's son, like you said. Very talented player. Kavasier Smoke's a good player as well. I like to see what he can do this year. Xavier Weaver, I think he's going to be the newcomer of the year in the conference. I'm excited to see what he can do. Savion Washington was a huge get for him at tackle. Good player. This team scored 15.4 points per game last year, 127th in the nation. They should easily be able to get 25, 30 points per game, in my opinion, this year. If they're able to double their points per game total, that'd be a great turnaround overnight. I think they have a very high-flying, high-potential offense here that's going to score a ton of points. This is a good unit through the portal. They added a lot of great pieces here. Really talented unit in terms of just raw talent. got to see if these guys can play together and gel and build a winning mentality.
Also, Travis Hunter is expected to be a wide receiver for him this year also. That's another added dynamic there. And I think you're right. Those numbers might be around 30 points per game because they're going to be playing from behind a lot this year. The defensive side of the ball, I picked them to go 0-12 last year, mainly because they were going to regress on this side of the ball because they lost a lot of really good football players. And wow, the 44.5 points per game was actually expected, 510 yards per game. That was also right on par, I would say, dead last against the run. A lot of new work here, though. If you look at the 2 deep depth chart, the one guy that's returning from last year's roster, safety Trevor Woods. Obviously, I think that what they did on the defensive line is really good. Leonard Payne, Jordan Dominic, who was a pass rush machine for Arkansas. Shane Coates was a pretty good run stopper for Dartmouth. Taja Alston from West Virginia has had some nice production in the past. They pick up Demoy Kennedy, Levante Bentley from Alabama and Clemson, respectively. And then the secondary, they have 2 former number 1 ranked recruits at corner, Travis Hunter and Cormani McLean. These guys are incredibly young, though. They'll be playing their first games in FBS competition, while Miles Slusher, who's a good box corner for Arkansas, who's a nice run stopper. We'll see what he can do for them this year. And then Cameron Sloan and Craig, those are from Jackson State, was a really good coverage player for them. I don't know what they're going to do on this side of the ball, Nick, because obviously defense is obviously a lot harder to get in tune with offense. Massive turnover on this side of the ball. I think in 3 to 4 years they can continue to do that. This roster is going to be incredibly deep with a lot of talent. But right now, at this moment in time, it's really hard, even tougher to get a read on this side of the ball because there's so many new pieces. And I've never seen anything like this ever, where your entire 2 deep is completely different than it was in the season prior. Is that actually a good thing, or do you think that might lead to somehow worse regression here?
I think it will lead to some issues, certainly. I don't think this defense can get any worse than it was last year. I mean, 44.5 points per game given up. It's just an atrocious number. They totally revamped this unit. They have some incredible talent. Kamari McLean, Travis Hunter, 2 incredible talented players. Travis Hunter, he follows Deion Sanders here. Hunter, of course, the number 1 recruit that committed to Jackson State and now comes to Colorado with his coach. I love Travis Hunter. This film on him is fantastic. Very talented player. Imagine if Florida State had Travis Hunter right now. That would have been crazy with the way that team is. But Travis Hunter's in Colorado. Great spot. Leonard Payne, a really good player. They added just so many different players. Shane Coates from Dartmouth, very underrated player. Good run stopper. Demoy Kennedy, Levante Bentley as well. 2 talented players coming from huge programs in Clemson and Alabama. This defense added so many good players, top to bottom. A totally revamped unit here that has some serious, nice production potential. Colorado is going to have to be better on defense considering how poor they were last year. I'm going to pump the brakes, though, on the Colorado hype. I just don't think that you can put together a team overnight like this and have success immediately. I think 2-10, 3-9, 4-8 is kind of right where this team is. Bowl eligibility seems like an absolute stretch for me. I do not think they have the chance to get there.
Yeah, they do play a really tough schedule as well. Now, looking at some awards in this conference, obviously, Caleb Williams is going to be the unanimous pick to win Offensive Player of the Year. I'm going to go Braylon Trice from Washington, a phenomenal edge rusher there. We got 2 for you. 2 high-end pass rushers here in this conference are going to be battling for that award. Jonathan Smith, Coach of the Year. I think that's a pretty easy choice there. Traquez Bridges, I think he's having a big breakout season for Dan Lanning. There are the cornerback position, filling the shoes of Christian Gonzalez. Barry Alexander being the newcomer of the year. I think it's going to be a big-time force for USC. They can really alter that run defense overnight. UCLA, alluded to them earlier, what they have on defense in terms of improvement. And then some of those guys they filled holes with on the offensive side of the ball. I think they could really be a big sleeper here. Oregon State's obviously going to be a sleeper too, but their schedule's a little bit easier, so I don't think they're going to be trending in the darkness as much. USC over Washington for me, punching its ticket to the CFP. Break down your awards.
I think there are some solid pieces. We agree on a lot of things. I think Latia Latu is going to get my Defensive Player of the Year. I just think he's primed for a huge season coming off the edge there. I think he's just too much potential. And at full health, I think he's just an incredible player who's going to get in the backfield of Braylon Trice. If it's not going to be Latu, I think Trice is going to win. It's going to be one of those 2 guys for me. Damian Martinez, I think he's going to have a huge breakout year. He had a pretty decent freshman year as a true freshman last year, but now he gets the opportunity to get the full reign of the offense here for this Oregon State team. I expect him to dominate on the ground, break out the RPOs, all that sort of thing is going to work out great play action. Xavier Weaver coming over to Colorado. I think he's primed for a big year. He's that lead wide receiver for this new Colorado offense. I think Shedeur Sanders will be throwing him the ball a lot. And if Colorado can find some sustained success on offense, I think it's going to come through Weaver. I like Oregon State as my biggest sleeper, like you said. They may not necessarily need the sleeper tag because they are playing a very light schedule and people know that this team is going to be good. So I do agree that maybe the sleeper tag is a little much for them, but I'm excited for this Oregon State team. They just have so much potential. New offense with a great quarterback in DJ and adding Damian Martinez and John Smith-Coakley. I'm excited for that. I have USC beating Oregon in the conference title game. I think Oregon just has enough on offense and just a little bit extra on defense to beat Washington head-to-head. I think it's going to be a coin flip between Oregon and Washington. Both teams are extremely talented. I think USC wins the conference this year. They go to the playoff and represent the Pac-12 and get the Pac-12's first bid in the playoff since Washington made the playoff several years ago.
That's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me. I think the Pac-12 in for a proper send-off this year. I think one of those top 3 teams, maybe even top 4, and maybe even Utah. I think they're going to find a way to get into the playoffs this year, one of those teams, and I think they're going to look to do some damage. Hopefully they play with some emotion for this conference because it's been a big part of college football for years. Not sure if that'll be in the back of the minds of these players, but regardless, I think this is in for a good year this season out west, but if they continue to beat each other up like they have in the past, well, it's just going to be another pretty sad season overall.
Excited for the final season of Pac-12. I always love this conference. Late night Pac-12 after dark's always been fun. It's sad to see it go, but I think they're all for a proper send-off, like you said.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.